The UDRcast is not affiliated and does not represent any 12-step fellowship. I, Bill Ward, the host of the UDRcast, will be sharing my experience and my journey of recovery. That does include, but is not limited to, the literature contained in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 Steps. Our guests will be sharing their own path to recovery and what has worked for them. The UDRcast encourages and supports all paths to recovery. Welcome everybody to the UDRcast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, and Recover. My name is Bill Ward, and I'm coming to you from the recovery capital of Canada, Calgary, Alberta. Here we are going to discuss everything recovery, different perspectives, different experiences, both with the people I know and with others from around the world. If you resonate with anything you've heard on this episode today, we ask that you share it with anyone who you think may benefit from it. If you have any questions or comments, please find us at billward.life and send us a message in the info section. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you are interested in more recovery content, you can find the buttons for the YouTube channel and other social media outlets on the homepage, and you will be redirected to those platforms. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time. Okay, here we go. So, arrived at this point, we're squarely confronted with the question of faith. We couldn't duck the issue anymore. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason towards the desired shore of faith. The outlines and the promise of a new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow we couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason for that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. So anyway, as we walk far over the bridge of reason, as you come into the program beaten by your own addiction, you're looking at the evidence of your life and what the substance is and that way of life and what it's doing to your life. So you're examining the evidence of your senses. You're using logic. Look at all this stuff and look at my life, right? That's what this is saying in my opinion. So you're walked far over the bridge of reason towards this desired shore of faith. Now you've made it to the program and there's this God thing and it kind of looks appealing and you're at this desired shore of faith, right? The outlines and the promise of the new land. You hear other people share and you get that hope. There's a new land here. There's a new way of life. Had brought luster to your tired eyes and fresh courage to your flagging spirits. And that's what the program did for me. It brought luster to my tired brokenness. And it brought this fresh courage to my flagging spirits. Gave me some hope, right? Friendly hands stretched out in welcome. Here's my sponsor. Here's all these members of the fellowship reaching out like, here, we can help you.
Here's that newcomer.
Right? Still don't live it down. See, decision based on self 6 years ago still places me in a position to be in. But not only is it the substance, right? We get crushed by all these other defects of character, and we can look at the evidence of our senses and go, but you got to be aware and you got to be willing. If you see that self-pity is fucking destroying your life, if you see that depression is destroying your life, if you see that lust is fucking up your life, anger, whatever it is, you can look at the evidence if you're awake enough and willing enough to look at it and go, fuck, man. You know, and then you can get the hope that I don't have to act in this and I don't have to be like this anymore. And that's also what this paragraph can be talked about. Okay? But perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason for that last mile and we did not like to lose our support. we lean too heavily on self and the old ideas and the way that we used to do things. And it's really hard to let it go and lose that security that whatever it is brings us. But it's a false security. And we don't want to lose that support. And to jump off a cliff and trust God without a parachute, it's a scary fucking proposition. But it's been my experience when you really have that willingness to jump off the cliff with the parachute, it'll open. And sometimes it doesn't open until you're right about to smash your guts onto the ground. But it always opens, right? And that was natural, but it let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, had we not been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith? For did not we believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Yes, we had been faithful, abjectly faithful to the God of reason. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved the whole time. And the context to this paragraph is actually trying to get you to believe in God and trying to convince the person that they had a belief in their own reasoning, right? So I'm kind of taking the literature and I'm turning it in a bit of a different and deeper way, right? But for the agnostic or the atheist, that's what they're trying to get across to the guy. I'm taking it because you guys all believe to whatever degree. I don't need to go there. I'm going deeper so that we see things in a deeper level. So we found too, we had been worshipers. Here it is. This is the whole crux of what we've been talking about tonight. What a state of mental gooseflesh that this used to bring on. Had we not variously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves. That's it. Right there. What kind of things do we worship? We worship the things in the world of the material. We worship people. We worship sports people. We worship actors. We worship people that we know. We wish we could be like them. We wish we had what they have. The money and the women or the guys and, the status or whatever it is, right? We worship these people. Things, money. Who of us doesn't worship money? Right? And when you think of worship, the sentiment behind worship, most people think worship means worshiping like God, Jesus Christ, kneeling down at the altar and worshiping something. Well, we got to change the context of what we think worship is. Worship means, what do you spend most of your time fucking thinking about? And what drives your fucking life? For a lot of men, it's the pursuit of female that drives their whole fucking life. The pursuit of the female allows them to buy the car or the motorbike that they want to buy. It has the choice on where they live and how they decorate their place and what they wear for a watch and what they wear for clothes and how they talk and what they listen to. And it's actually driving their whole life. And it's a worship. Well, where did they worship? Where did they learn that? They learn that in our society because our society perpetuates that for men. And then the women, you guys also have to live up to a certain perpetual idea that's not real, that actually makes us feel worse because we're missing the mark, right? And then ourselves. We worship ourselves, our pomp of self. How we look, how much time do we spend in the mirror? What is this going to do for me? How is this going to serve me? Right? Everything's about us because our society is based in that. And we're based in that. But the biggest one out of all of these is what Daniel mentioned, and it's the sentiment. It's the biggest one out of all of them. And sentiment is ideas, ideologies, belief systems, which is why earlier I talked about what belief systems do you believe in and why do you believe in them? Are they even fucking yours? And most of them are not, because they're based on the ideologies of the world of the material, in selfishness and money and power and control. And when we live like that, we fucking don't feel right. Because why? Because we're missing the mark. Okay? So the sentiments really need to be looked at in your life. What ideologies have you been brought up in? Are they real? Are they good? And the ideas that you think are actually good, are they actually good for you? Are they good for your spirit? Or are they good for your core? Like a lot of people think, well, I need money. I need money. So they make everything about money. But they're using it to an extreme that doesn't actually serve them, right? Yeah, relationships are great too, but does it have to be the way that society tells us it has to be? Because love, in the way society deems love, is actually possession, control, eroticism, and all these other things that we think is love. But it's actually a lot of codependency traits and behaviors, and it's actually based in self and it's based in fear, which is why a lot of these relationships turn toxic. But when you base like your relationship in real love and real kindness and not try to control anything or anybody, now you're getting to the core of like what unconditional love actually is. So the sentiments drive all this other shit, okay? And when we think of all of these things, these people, things, money, sentiments, how do we get those into us? The five senses. It's all in our mind. We see, we taste, we touch, we hear, and we build everything off of the five senses. And that's a great fucking point. Trying to like, the sentiment, the belief system is that is better. And that's how it should be here today. So then we drift into the morbid reflection and we fucking live in the sentiment and the ideology of the past. And we wish it was here today. So it's running your life in a way. And some of the old sentiments, we're so fearful of some of that we won't fucking give ourselves the opportunity here today to live a new experience in it. Because the trauma and the shit that was caused through the experience of life, our truth is, I'm not doing that because really I'm afraid. But then we will rationalize whatever excuse because we need to justify it. Instead of going, you know what, I'm just fucking scared. I'm a little fucking scared kid. But then our pride gets involved and we need to rationalize whatever it is, right? And it all comes from the mind, from the ego, from here, okay? That's what I really want to highlight. And then with a better motive, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or the flower? Okay. I'm going to ask somebody. Tyler. Give me the three, if you're on your deathbed today, give me the three most important moments of your life.
When my children were born. That's two of them. There was one each. They were both.
That's one.
That is one. Yeah.
Well, it's two different events. Okay, so when my children were born, the day that sparked my recovery. I don't even know what the third would be.
Okay, give me something that fucking lights up your life today.
So, like an event?
Something. An event or an interaction or...
Yeah, actually, that's probably one of them. Is seeing the light come on in guys' eyes now that I get to work with.
Okay.
Like seeing that actual change.
Okay, give me three places that are your most favorite to be on this planet.
My friend Jenny's acreage out by Sundry. When I will climb the top of the pyramid in Mexico. And the playground across the street from where I grew up.
Okay. So, when you think of all those things that are the most important things basically in your life, the first questions I asked, where do they originate from on your body?
Well, nowhere from me.
Where do you feel it?
Well, I feel it inside.
In your heart.
Yeah.
Right. And when you go to these places that are beautiful, where do you feel that shit? In your heart. When you look at a flower, it's not because you're looking at it with your mind, you're looking at it with your heart. When you see the beauty of the sunset, you're seeing it with the beauty of the being of who you are. Right? And when we look at all these other things that we think are important, the pride and the ego, it all comes from examining the evidence of our senses. But the things that are really most important, your kids, looking at another guy's eyes when he starts waking up, being at your friend's acreage, watching the sunset or a sunrise or looking at the flowers or the stars, that shit all comes from here. And that's what is fucking here to guide our lives. And that is the most important part of us. But because we examine the evidence of our senses and we use reasonable approach and interpretation, the world tells us fucking shit that's a lie. And we believe the lie. And we go against ourselves. And then we cause a lot of fucking shit within ourselves. So as we keep reading here, who of us had not loved something or somebody? And then another question is, try to prove you love your kid. Show me, prove it. You can't prove that. You know, you can't prove it. You just know it. Right? It's a knowing. And it's the most powerful thing in the world, is that love for your children or for your dog or for your cat. How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships have to do with pure reason? Nothing. They have nothing to do with the mind. Little or nothing, we saw it last. We're not these things the tissue of which our lives were constructed. Yeah, this is the basic tissue of why we're fucking here. Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? Yeah. When we try to go out into the world of the material, make money and get things, usually the end goal is so we can go spend time and live with our heart, with our kids or our families or whatever. But we confuse a lot of this shit and make that shit more important. When really, like I said, I used to have millions of dollars, and I don't today. But my relationships with my kids and the fucking way I can show up in a way that I never was able to is way more important to them than any amount of fucking money that I could ever give them. But I never would have thought that until I burned it down and kind of came here and did this work, right? So it was impossible to say we had no capacity for faith or love or worship. In one form or another, we'd been living by faith and little else. Imagine life without faith, where nothing left but pure reason. It wouldn't be life. But we believed in life. Of course we did. We could not prove life in the sense you can prove a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Yet there it was. Could we still say the whole thing was nothing but a mass of electrons created out of nothing, meaning nothing, whirling on to a destiny of nothingness? Of course we couldn't. The electrons themselves seemed more intelligent than that. At least said so the chemist. Hence we saw that reason is not fucking everything. Neither is reason, as most of us use it, entirely dependable, though it emanate from our best minds. What about people who prove that man could never fly? Yet we've been seeing another kind of flight, a spiritual liberation from this world of the material. People who rose above their problems, and they said God made these things possible, and we only smiled. We had seen spiritual release, but like to tell ourselves it wasn't true. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God, the mark. It may be obscured, blocked off by the things that we see, touch, feel, smell, and learn through society, obscured by the calamity and the pomp and the worship of these other things. And it's the pomp and the worship of these other things that create the fucking calamity. But in some form or another, it is there. God is there. The heart and love is there. It's just obscured and blocked off by something we make more important, examining the evidence of our senses. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives is facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup. It's part of us. It's in us. Just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he is there. He was as much of a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. It was in the last analysis. It was only there that he may be found. It was so within us. So it's in the last place we ever fucking look for God, and it's in us. We don't need to look for God in women, in money, in material things. As we draw nearer to God within us, which means we take away the shit that is causing the calamity, the pomp and the worships, we find God in us. And he is the fundamental idea within every man, woman, and child. And as we journey towards this journey of the heart, we have to fucking go through a lot of pain, because the ego attaches to these sentiments. And the sentiments give us the sense of security based on the five senses, because that's what we've thought and learned. But really, we will learn down the road that common sense that makes sense will thus become uncommon sense. And the way that you lived and tried to get security and pry and take out of life to make you happy, it's actually the opposite. So the words in this book that say common sense will thus become uncommon sense has fucking huge meaning. And you'll know that line is true when you know that line is true. And you will see a lot of these lines in this book will have a way different meaning to you than they do right now as you go down the path and work for fucking your creator. And through this journey of fucking pain and hardships, and you don't stop and you don't give up, and Anna's a perfect, beautiful example of it, you just keep fucking going. And it's lonely and it's hard. But it doesn't mean we stop, because the other alternative is the step zero promises and pray to misery and depression. Means fucking prey means an animal that hunts and stalks another to eat and kill. People kill themselves in misery and depression. That's where we'll go if we don't fucking keep going. So if we can only clear the ground a bit, if our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So as we clear this ground a bit, and our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly and search diligently within yourself. So, anyone know anything about drilling rigs? Is it 7 o'clock? 7:20. 7:20, okay. Drilling rigs. They're set up to get the natural gas or the oil. Typically, okay? They clear the ground, they clear all the topsoil with bulldozers, and they get to the mineral soil, and then they flatten it out. They bring in the drilling rigs, they set up these drilling rigs, and they're going for the resource, Mother Nature's resource. And these guys use these big fucking bits, and on the bits, what do they use to cut through all the shit? Anyone? Diamonds. So all these bits are diamonds. In the step 7, it says, we need much more of this precious quality than may be required for sobriety if we have a chance at becoming truly happy, or have the faith that can meet any emergency. So it's telling me that the precious stone of the program is humility. And I need more of this humility than is required just for sobriety if I have a chance of becoming truly happy, or to have the faith that can meet any emergency. Because I need the faith that will meet any emergency, because the fucking tragedy is coming at some point. And I need to fucking get through that. The only way to get through that is with a relationship with yourself and with God. So as they start drilling into the ground, they cut through fucking shale and limestone and sandstone, and they cut through all the layers of the crust. Sometimes they break the bits, then they fish out the bits, and they don't stop. And they keep fucking cutting, and it takes them a year, sometimes 2 years to drill some of these wells. But finally, they fucking get through all of that shit. And then they hit it. And then the oil and the gas is just, psh. It's an unlimited supply for the most part. That's what the program is. Step 4 and the step 5 and the 6, 7, and 8 is the drilling rig on us. And it's cutting through the resentments. It's cutting through the fear. It's cutting through the hate and the judgment and the guilt and the shame. And it's fucking cutting. And sometimes we break drill bits. Sometimes we fucking bend the stems. But we keep going. And what is that drill bit? The drill bit is the humiliation and the pain. And it's the humility that we need to get down to that unsuspected inner resource within us. The drilling rig is trying to get Mother Nature's resource. We're trying to get God's resource, the unsuspected inner resource within us. Once we cut through all that shit, we have an endless supply. Now, as long as I don't live in pomp and worship of other things, I can keep the channel clear. Which is why the inventory and the processes of this program are so important to keep up. Because if you just fucking get on with the business of being self-satisfied and you don't do this stuff, the shit will deal with you. And if we're powerless and we succumb to a desire, self is cunning, baffling, and powerful. It bleeds back in, starts running your life again. And then you're drunk and you're like, how did this happen? Well, it happens pretty fucking simply. So it's like a cautionary tale. Beware, don't let your fucking program slide. And if your program is implemented because you fear using and going back to the old life, then you want to keep working it extra hard. Because what pulls you along in this journey is when the God dope is fucking better than anything that you've ever experienced. And the God dope pulls you along all the time. And you don't want to stop doing the program. Because the program is about self-abandonment, which is actually self-care. Through my self-care, I can care for other people. That's really what this is. And through the service and caring for other people, I fucking never want to drink again. And I never want to fucking not seek God. And it's a fucking journey. So, let's keep going. In this book, you will read the experience of a man, Bill W., who thought he was an atheist. His story is interesting. Some of it should be told now. The change of his heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school where he became rebellious with what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble, frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. Sounds like the step zero promises. Sounds like complete bankruptcy of mind, emotion, spirit, physical. One night when he was confined to a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic, Ebby, who had known a spiritual experience. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, if there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question. Is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then like a thunderbolt, the great thought came and it crowded out all else. Who are you to say there's no God? This is where Bill W. has his profound spiritual experience. We don't have it like that typically. But Bill W. turned his will and his life over to God in one moment. This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by the conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of the great tide at flood. The barriers, the judgments, the ideologies, the sentiments that he had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. So he's turned his will and his life over. Thus, our friend's cornerstone was fixed in place. A couple sessions ago, I told you to circle the word cornerstone. The cornerstone is the ideal of God, earlier in this chapter. And it says, upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure could be built. Okay? Doesn't mean it's built just because you believe in God. If God is just a concept, it doesn't get built. Bill W. has turned his will and his life over to the care of God. So that concept and that foundation piece of his life is now fixed in place because he's turned it over. Okay? No later vicissitude had shaken it. Vicissitude means no later life's happenings or tragedies has shaken his belief in his Creator. His alcoholic problem, the substance abuse problem, was taken away that very night years ago. That's a promise of step 10. It's the exact same promises of what I'm going to read here are in the step 10. Because why? Because step 10 is where you turn your will and your life over to God. When you follow the practical application of what this program lays out, not in a theory position, but in a practical application, practical experience process, you will be turning your will and your life over to God. You don't need to fucking guess. You just need to be aware of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, follow the process. The results are the principles. You may not like them. You may feel some fucking pain out of it, but it is the humiliation and the humble through pain that takes you to the conscious companionship to your Creator, living with love, essentially healing. It disappeared, except for a few brief moments of temptation, just like step 10. The thought of drink has never returned. The problem's been removed, it says in step 10. At such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. That is, we recoil as from a hot flame. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God has restored his sanity. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. The circumstances in your life, as you walk out this door and you get into the life again, the circumstances in your life will heal you if you're willing to believe and bring God in. So every single thing out this door is going to teach you something about you. Am I willing to bring God in? If I am, then the miracle of healing can commence. And if you're not, if you want to run the show out of your insecurities and your brokenness like you always have, you will not heal. And whatever you resist is always going to persist. The lesson of life will always be presented back in your path until you learn the fucking lesson. And sometimes you need to relearn the lesson because you actually haven't learned the lesson. So that's why these things are repeatedly put in front of your path. But are you awake enough to fucking see it? Or are you just saying, fuck, life's happening to me, what the fuck? Well, you're on the wrong fucking track. Everything is going to teach you something, and it won't be fucking fun. When God is rebuilding with you and doing with you as he will, when you made that commitment of a step 3 prayer, please fucking build with me and do with me as thou wilt. That means fucking tear me down and renovate me. And the tearing down and renovation is a painful fucking process. Relieve me of the bondage of self. Take away these difficulties, defects of character, broken parts of me, so that victory over them may bear witness. The victory over them is the fucking hard part. Because they're so ingrained in sentiment and belief. And I don't want to step from bridge to shore because I lean too heavily on these things still. But am I going to jump off the cliff with the parachute and trust God and try something different? Maybe it's really hard to do that. Well, you got fucking people who can fucking hold your hand and fucking pull you through that shit and help you with your Creator. And then your track record of your belief in God will turn from fucking belief, maybe, to some fucking faith. Yeah, okay, look at what's happening. To fucking trust, where you can jump off the fucking cliff and know. And whatever happens, happens, because nothing happens in God's world by mistake. God is fucking everything or he is nothing. He is the seemingly good in your life and the seemingly bad. He is fucking everything. He is, you get the job, you don't get the job. You got the girl, you don't got the girl. You got the relationship, you don't got the relationship. He is fucking everything at that point. Not fucking what you think is God when it's good. God is the fucking seemingly bad too. And you can't connect the dots in your life till you fucking pass your life. You can't see the light in the dark of where God lit up your life until you're fucking down the road. And if you're trying to connect too many dots here right now, you're living in self. You try to connect too many dots in the future, you're living in self. It's okay to have goals, but as you move towards the goal, as you change the star changes too. So the circumstances, if you're willing to believe, will give you the miracle of healing. Millimeter by millimeter by millimeter. And if you fuck up along the way, but you're willing to fucking grow and learn, you're never fucking up. You're always learning and growing. And even if you make the mistake and you can't seem to get that thing under control, are you still willing? That's the most important thing. And through the willingness, it will fucking turn itself around and you'll catch whatever it is with God's help. And you can start moving in the other direction. And nothing comes easy and it takes work because these things are difficult. And if it was easy, everyone would do it. Circumstances made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his maker, then he knew. That's a step 7 line. Okay? In the step 7 original manuscript, it says, humbly on my knees, offered myself to my maker, holding nothing back. That is a level of surrender that very few people can comprehend. And when you understand the step 7 prayer, it is about fucking surrender, unslavishly devoting yourself to the Creator. Which means without original thought or idea, you fucking work with love without reservation. It's always the reservation that fucks us. Because when I reserve, I'm thinking about myself. What am I going to lose? What I'm not going to get? And that's why it's without reservation. Once you get without reservation, you're working altruistic plane. You are fucking doing things for the benefit of other people, for their health, welfare, and their well-being, regardless of your own. But the thing is it helps your own health, welfare, and well-being. That's the difference between step 6 and 7. Step 6 is I'm trying to fucking do God's will, but it's fucking hard. Step 7 is I'm fucking invested in it. I might make a mistake because I'm human, but I don't care because I fucking want to serve my God through service. Amen. Stamp with the contract. So humbly on our knees, we offered ourselves to his maker, then he knew. What did he know? Anyone? God was real, and God was going to fucking take care of him. Everything's going to be fucking okay. He knew that. And then all those fears go away when you have that level of surrender. You know that it's okay. Even so, God has restored us all to our right minds. To this man, the revelation was sudden. To Bill W., the revelation of turning his will was sudden. Some of us, most of us, grow into it more slowly. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. I got to be seeking this, God. When we drew near to him, that's within us. I draw near to him within myself by looking at myself and accepting things and shit that I don't want to accept or look at. And I draw near to God and I discard damaged and unsaleable goods that do not serve you or me without regret. And I get closer to God in the last analysis, the last place I ever thought to look for God, and he's right here. And he disclosed himself to us. Boom. Thank you for tuning in to the UDRcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode. The viewpoints and the opinions expressed today were solely of the individual sharing them. If you resonated with this episode, please follow us and share this link with anyone that may benefit from it. Please visit us at Billwardlife to see everything that we have going on. We can recover, one person, one family, one community at a time.